They said the beasts weren't worth saving. They said the war had already chewed them up, spat them out, and left them as rotting trophies for scavengers to pick at. The galaxy didn't care. The fleets didn't care. Hell, even the stars seemed to have turned their backs. And yet, in that suffocating dark, a lone human broke the silence, not with words, not with diplomacy, but with an action so reckless, so stupid, that even the cold-blooded warlords watching through their encrypted channels had to pause and mutter, "What the hell is this human doing?" The hangar smelled like burnt ozone and blood. The beast in the center was massive, all sinew and scars, with its 6 eyes half-lidded, chained to the floor by anchors thicker than a starship's hull plates. Its breath came in slow, wet rattles, each exhale fogging the stale air. Around it, alien guards lounge, sharp weapons dangling, ready to gut anything that moved too close. The thing was a relic of a war that no one even remembered clearly anymore. An enemy of everyone. A monster that had torn apart entire cities with its claws. And now it was entertainment. From the shadows, the human stepped forward. No armor, no gun, just a grimy jacket, torn boots, and a stare that didn't blink. Every camera had been shut off hours ago. No witnesses were supposed to be here. The galaxy's official stance was simple: let the beasts die in their cages. No one wanted the political mess of keeping one alive. But humans, with their stupid, self-destructive habit of getting involved, didn't follow the script. The humans' boots clicked on the metal floor as they crossed the distance, each step echoing like a countdown. The alien guards smirked at first, thinking it was some pathetic mercy visit. But the human didn't stop at the perimeter. They walked right into the danger zone, right into the shadow of the beast. The creature's 6 eyes snapped open. The chains groaned. The air seemed to compress, thick with the kind of tension that made every nerve scream run. The guards gripped their weapons tighter, waiting for the inevitable, the snap, the blood, the messy cleanup. But instead, the human reached out, barehanded, and touched the side of the beast's head. Not a slap, not a shove, just a touch. Slow, deliberate. The galaxy had seen humans fight wars. It had seen them build machines that bent physics until it whimpered. But this was different. This was the kind of insane intimacy that didn't belong on a battlefield. The human whispered something low, so low that even the nearest guards couldn't hear it, and the beast's breathing changed. It wasn't wheezing anymore. It was listening. In that moment, the chain wasn't just holding the beast. It was holding the entire galaxy's breath. And somewhere, deep in the creature's ancient mind, something shifted. This was the moment the galaxy should have realized. Humans didn't just fight for themselves. They fought for things everyone else had already given up on. And when they did, the rules stopped mattering. The alien guards weren't laughing anymore. They didn't even breathe. That human, that stupid, reckless, nerve-wracking human, had their bare palm pressed against the side of a war beast that had chewed through entire platoons of armored soldiers. Its skin was hot and rough, like metal plates grown out of living flesh, and under that surface, muscles twitched like they were deciding whether to snap the human in half or tear down the whole damn station. The lead guard, a hulking four-armed brute from the Solvar clans, hissed a warning in a tongue. Humans weren't supposed to understand Solvar speech, but the human didn't even flinch. They just kept talking softly to the beast, like they were sharing some dirty little secret the rest of the galaxy wasn't invited to hear. The chains clanked, tension creaking through every link. The beast leaned forward, so close the human's reflection warped across one of its black, wet eyes. In that reflection, the guards saw something they didn't like. Not fear, not pity, but challenge. And that was the moment they realized this human wasn't here for some mercy kill or pity mission. This was a jailbreak. One of the guards stepped forward, weapon raised, but the human's hand shot out, not to attack, but to point at the massive locking collar bolted into the beast's neck. Their voice finally rose, sharp and cutting. "This thing dies, you lose more than you know." That single sentence was enough to stall everyone. It wasn't the words, exactly. It was the way they came out, like they weren't a request. They were a threat carved into reality itself. The Solvar leader snarled, but didn't strike. He had heard the rumors. Humans were dangerous, not just because they fought like they were born for it, but because they convinced you that letting them win was your own idea. And then it happened. The human pulled something from their jacket, a shard of some alien tech no one recognized at first, glowing faintly with sick green light, a relic, forbidden tech. The kind of thing that could get you executed in 9 star systems just for touching it. The guards froze. The human slid the shard into the collar's locking core, and the sound it made, a low, mechanical sigh, echoed like the whole galaxy was waking up. The chains didn't snap. They died. Every magnetic clamp, every gravlock, every reinforced anchor just went limp, clattering to the floor. The beast straightened, taller than any of the guards, towering over the human. It could have ended them right there. It didn't single quotes too. Instead, the beast lowered its head, and the human stepped forward, pressing their forehead to its scarred alien skull. For one impossible second, the hangar was silent. No one breathed. No one dared. And then the beast's roar ripped through the air. Not pain, not rage, but claiming the guards broke. Some ran, some aimed and fired, bolts of plasma ripping into the walls. The human moved first, not away, but with the beast, ducking under a swinging claw and charging straight into the chaos like they'd planned it from the start. From that moment on, the galaxy's neat little rules about letting the beasts die were about to get obliterated. The station's sirens screamed like a wounded animal, every light flashing red, bathing the hangar in the color of war. Steam hissed from ruptured coolant lines, mixing with the stench of ozone and the copper bite of fresh blood. The beast moved like a shadow on fire, all muscle and fury, each step shaking the deck plating. The human was right there beside it, boots pounding, eyes locked ahead as if nothing else in the galaxy mattered. Alien guards poured in from every corridor, some wielding shock pikes, others with heavy plasma rifles that could melt a grav truck in seconds. They didn't care who the human was or what political fallout would come. They just wanted the monster dead. The first wave came fast, too fast. The Solvar leader charged with all 4 arms swinging, blades flashing like silver comets. The human ducked low, slid under one of the beast's legs, and came up inside the Solvar's guard. A flick of the wrist, a hidden blade, and the brute's upper hands went limp. Severed tendons spraying black ichor across the walls. The beast followed, one claw sweeping sideways, and the Solvar leader hit the floor in 2 separate pieces. The guards faltered. The human didn't. They grabbed a fallen plasma rifle, the weight of it solid and familiar in their hands. No hesitation. Bolts of blue-white fire ripped through the air, punching smoking holes through the guard's armor. Each shot was precise, surgical, not wasteful, not panicked. The beast mirrored the violence with raw brutality, claws rending steel and flesh like they were made of paper. The floor trembled again, this time not from the beast, but from something deeper in the station. Heavy doors slammed shut across the hangar's exits, locking them in. Overhead, a deep mechanical thrum began, like some ancient war machine waking from a long sleep. The beast froze mid-stride, its 6 eyes darting upward. The human knew that sound, not from this station, but from a battlefield years ago, where that exact noise had meant run or burn, killed them both. The order came through the station's loudspeakers, cold and metallic. Somewhere in the control tower, a faceless officer was throwing every card they had on the table. From the ceiling, turrets unfolded, barrels glowing as they charged. The human didn't wait. They grabbed a fallen guard's energy shield, slammed it into the beast's side like a makeshift barrier, and dragged them both toward the nearest cover, a half-collapsed cargo hauler. The first volley hit. The shield flared, whining as it soaked the impacts. The beast snarled, low and guttural, as if the very air was daring it to die. The human's teeth clenched. Not today. With a growl of vengeance, the cargo haulers' dead systems sputtered to life. The beast had jammed one of its claws into the engine core and forced it awake. Together they shoved, turning the massive hauler into a moving wall. Sparks showered from the floor as it scraped forward, absorbing turret fire like a sacrificial shield. They were making for the far wall, and the human's eyes locked on a single maintenance hatch, just big enough for them both if they squeezed. The problem, it was on the other side of a kill zone, and the station wasn't done throwing nightmares at them. From the far end of the hangar, a new shape emerged, tall, skeletal, wrapped in spines and glowing veins. An executioner drone, not the kind you fought, the kind you survived only if it got bored. The beast's lips pulled back from its teeth. The human's pulse spiked. This wasn't just an escape anymore. This was war in a box, and someone had just locked the door. The executioner drone moved like a nightmare wrapped in razor wire. Every joint hissed as it unfolded into its full, horrifying height. Its spined limbs ending in hooked blades that dripped with some chemical that hissed on contact with the floor. Its head was nothing more than a split maw of serrated metal, opening and closing in a rhythm that was too deliberate to be random. The moment it stepped forward, the air itself seemed to tense, as if the room was holding its breath. The beast stepped in front of the human, its entire frame rigid, every scarred muscle pulled tight like cables ready to snap. Its 6 eyes locked on the drone, and for one heartbeat, they just stared at each other, predator against predator. The human didn't waste that heartbeat. They slammed a power cell into the plasma rifle, dialed it to overload, and felt the weapon hum with a dangerous heat that said you've got 30 shots before it eats itself alive. The executioner came first. No warning, no flourish, just a blur of motion. Its first strike split the cargo hauler in 2, sparks and shrapnel, raining down like molten rain. The beast roared and lunged, meeting the next strike with its claws, metal shrieking as they locked together. The drone's head split wider, rows of grinding teeth spinning like a saw, and it snapped forward toward the beast's neck. The human moved. 1 step, 1 breath, and the first plasma bolt slammed into the side of the drone's skull. The impact didn't kill it. Nothing ever did that easily, but it staggered just enough for the beast to twist and drive a knee upward, slamming the drone into the deck with enough force to crack the plating. The drone recovered instantly. It didn't bleed, didn't scream. It just moved faster. blades swept through the air in arcs so fast they sang, forcing the human to dive and roll, heat from a near miss blistering their skin. The beast took another hit, a deep slash across its side, but didn't slow. Instead, it mirrored the drone's speed. Each strike and counter-strike, a blur of steel and flesh. The human realized something in that chaos. This wasn't just a fight, it was a conversation. One spoken in the oldest language there was: survival. The beast's attacks opened windows. The human's shots slammed through those windows before they could close. The drone adapted, its movements shifting to account for both threats at once, but the human was faster. Humans were always faster, not in speed, but in audacity. They didn't move like soldiers or hunters. They moved like gamblers, throwing themselves into the kind of bets no sane creature would take. The turning point came when the beast fainted. Left, then let itself get slammed backward into a wall, pinning the drone's blades for half a second. That was all the human needed. They charged, plasma rifle screaming at full overload, and jammed the muzzle into the drone's gaping metal maw. The shot detonated like a star going nova. The blast flung the human backward, smashing them into a wall hard enough to knock the air from their lungs. The drone's head was gone, molten fragments still dripping from the ceiling, its body twitching violently as the beast ripped its spine free and flung it across the hangar. Silence fell, broken only by the beast's heavy breathing and the distant groan of the station's metal bones. The human forced themselves to their feet, every muscle trembling from adrenaline. The beast turned, blood, its own and others, streaking its hide, and dipped its head low again. Not submission, not gratitude, recognition. Somewhere in the control tower, someone was watching, and for the first time they were afraid. Not of the beast, but of the human who had just made it a weapon again. The sirens didn't stop, they only got angrier. The deep red light flashing through the corridors now carried a darker tone, the kind that meant the station had shifted. From contain the breach to burn everything, lose nothing. The human knew what that meant. They'd seen this before on other battlefields. Once the brass decided a fight wasn't worth winning clean, they hit the big red button and turned the whole place into an unmarked grave. The beast stalked at their side, every movement taut with predatory awareness. Its wounds bled thick and slow, steaming in the cold air, but its pace never faltered. The human's rifle was slagged from the overload blast, so they scavenged what they could from the corpses littering the hangar: a short-barrel plasma repeater, a satchel of grenades shaped like jagged black fruit, and a cracked visor that flickered with partial schematics of the station. The visor's display glitched, spitting static over the map, but it was enough to see the ugly truth. The station's upper decks were already sealed off. Bulkhead after bulkhead was closing in a slow-moving choke, forcing everything toward the central reactor. They weren't just trapping the human and beast, they were herding them. The human spat a curse and kept moving. Every corridor was a gauntlet. Now gunfire screaming from behind overturned crates, security drones skittering along the ceiling like metallic spiders, acid mines hissing as they bubbled holes into the deck. The beast didn't bother with cover. It was the cover, its massive frame taking the brunt of the enemy's fire, claws carving through steel and bone without slowing. The first explosion came from above, a maintenance tunnel rigged to blow, showering molten shards across the hallway. The human ducked under the beast's flank, feeling the searing heat lick their skin, and popped up to return fire. A repeater bolt punched through an enemy's throat, turning their command into a wet gurgle before they dropped. The station's COMMS crackled overhead. A voice, cold and dripping with disdain, echoed through the metal walls. You've taken something that does not belong to you, human. Surrender now, and I may allow you to live. The human grinned like a wolf that had just spotted a lame deer. Come take it. They reached a junction where the walls widened into a loading bay filled with crates stamped with hazard glyphs. Perfect. The human yanked the pin on one of the black fruit grenades and lobbed it into the nearest stack. The detonation wasn't loud, it was deep, like the floor itself had been punched. Fire blossomed upward, shredding the hazard crates and spilling glowing, unstable cores across the deck. The beast roared and charged through the chaos tail, sweeping, sending enemy troops crashing into the sparking wreckage. Then came the second voice, not overcomes, but deep inside the human's earpiece, a whisper they hadn't heard in years. You've got less than 9 minutes before they cook the reactor. Get to the docking ring. Now. The human's chest tightened. That voice was supposed to be dead. The beast glanced back, sensing the shift in the human's heartbeat, and rumbled low, as if asking whether the fight had just changed. It had. They weren't just escaping anymore. They were on a timer. And if they didn't make the docking ring before the reactor blew, it wouldn't just be the station that died. It would be everything in a 6-kilometer radius, reduced to drifting ash. The human slammed a fresh power cell into the repeater, teeth bared. Let's make this fast. The air tasted like burnt copper and ionized dust, every breath scraping the throat raw. The corridors ahead weren't just blocked, they were bleeding. Coolant lines ruptured from earlier blasts spewed freezing vapor that clung to skin and armor alike, slowing movement and freezing the blood of the dead into crystalline stains on the deck. The human didn't slow, couldn't. The countdown was ticking in their head, each second loud as a gunshot. The beast moved beside them like a battering ram given life, its claws sparking as they carved deep gouges into bulkheads that dared block their way. Every enemy between them and the docking ring became nothing but meat and noise. The beast's roars and the human's gunfire blended into a rhythm step. Kill, move, repeat. A duet of destruction that no military manual could ever teach. The station's automated defenses kicked in full force. Turret nests unfolded. From the ceiling, spitting plasma streams hot enough to vaporize bone. The human dove into a roll, sliding under the crackling fire, coming up on one knee with the repeater screaming in rapid bursts. One turret's head snapped back, showering molten slag onto the deck. The beast leaped at the other, tearing the entire mount from its housing and hurling it into a squad of charging soldiers. They hit a choke point, a narrow corridor where the walls curved inward, lit only by the sick blue glow of emergency strips. The human's visor flashed a warning. Pressure seals active. This wasn't just a lockdown corridor, it was a purged tunnel. At any second, the system could flush the air and send them both spinning into the void. The human ripped off the visor. No more distractions, and sprinted. Behind them, the bulkhead door screeched as it began to lower, hydraulics whining. The beast didn't need orders. It shoved the human forward, claws digging into the deck for traction. They burst out of the tunnel just as the door slammed shut, cutting off the hiss of escaping air. No pause, no breath. The docking ring was still 3 decks up, and the lifts were dead. That left only the maintenance climb shafts. The human cursed. They were barely wide enough for them, let alone the beast. But the beast didn't hesitate. It rammed its claws into the shaft's walls, climbing with a terrifying, spider-like grace. the human clinging to the ridged plates of its back. Halfway up, the shaft shook violently. Somewhere below, something exploded. Not a reactor yet, but close. The sound of rending metal echoed upward, followed by the deep, mechanical growl of another war drone. This one didn't sound small. By the time they reached the top hatch, the human's arms burned like fire, their grip slipping on the beast's hide. They slammed a boot into the hatch lock. It gave way with a metallic scream, and they tumbled into the upper docking concourse. The concourse wasn't empty. Alien. Marines in heavy exoframes waited in formation, their armor gleaming under the harsh lights, weapons locked and ready. Behind them, visible through the transparent docking shield, was the human's only shot at escape, a battered freighter, with one engine still smoking from damage. The leader of the Marines stepped forward, voice amplified through the suits. "Speakers, you die here, human. The beast dies with you." The human's smile was pure venom. "You first," the beast lunged. The concourse became a war zone. The first Marine went flying before his trigger finger even twitched. The beast hit the formation like a meteor made of muscle and rage, its claws shearing through the exoframe's armored plating like it was wet foil. The human moved in the chaos it created, weaving between armored giants, the plasma repeater, coughing fire into every weak spot they knew existed. Knees, visors, the back seam of the neck, places that armor manuals pretended didn't matter. The concourse's floor was a mess of deck plates, overhanging open machinery pits, and the fight tore those plates loose. The clang of falling metal mixed with the scream of tearing hydraulics, as bodies were crushed under their own heavy suits. The air reeked of scorched polymer and cooked alien flesh. The Marines didn't break formation easily. Every step the human took forward was answered with a wall of plated fists and energized shields. But the beast was there. Chaos engine. Every Marine it ripped away left a hole, and the human filled those holes with death. At one point, a Marine twice the human's size grabbed them by the collar and tried to slam them into the deck. The human drove the butt of the repeater into the alien's helmet so hard the visor caved in. A short burst ended him before he hit the ground. Through the din, the freighter was visible, tantalizingly close. Its gangway was half extended, swaying with the tremor of distant explosions from the reactor core. The countdown in the human's head was running thin. 7 minutes, maybe less. And the docking shield, a transparent shimmering barrier, was still active. Without the shield dropping, no one was leaving. The human ducked a wild swing, sliding under another Marine's legs, and caught sight of the control console mounted near the docking bay's edge. A dozen armored Marines between them and it. No cover, just a straight, suicidal sprint. Perfect. "Cover me," the human muttered. Not to the Marines. Not to anyone listening over comms, but to the beast. It understood. The beast roared. A bone-deep sound that rattled the glass panels of the concourse. It charged into the bulk of the Marines, ramming and swiping in a frenzy that scattered them like leaves in a storm. The human broke from its shadow, sprinting across open floor, repeater blazing. Shots glanced off shields and armor, but they kept moving, every step chewing into the distance between them and the console. One Marine broke through, towering over the human with a powered glaive sparking at its tip. They didn't slow. They dove under the swing, rolled hard, and came up with one of the black fruit grenades already primed. The throw was short, perfect. It stuck to the Marine's chest and detonated mid-step, ripping the armor apart in a shower of molten slag. The console was in reach. The human slammed a palm onto the override, punching in the most illegal set of codes they'd ever memorized. The docking shield flickered, stuttered, and dropped. The cold bite of vacuum clawed into the concourse, dragging loose debris toward the now open void. Marines scrambled for footing. The human didn't wait. They waved the beast forward. It leaped. Across the remaining Marines, claws tearing through anyone in its way, and landed halfway up the freighter's gangway. The human followed, boots barely touching the deck. A shot rang out. Not plasma, ballistic, old school. It tore past the human's cheek, so close it burned. They glanced back and froze. The Marine commander had leveled a long-barrel kinetic rifle, its muzzle smoking. He didn't aim at the human. He aimed at the beast. The shot fired. The round hit like thunder. The beast's entire frame jerked, momentum shattering as it collapsed onto the gangway. The sound it made wasn't a roar, it was deeper, rougher. The sound of something ancient and unstoppable suddenly cut short. Black blood sprayed across the freighter's hull in a thick arc, splattering over the human's jacket and face. The Marine commander racked another round with calm precision, the kind of confidence only someone certain of a kill could have. The kinetic rifle was no standard issue. It was an extinction gun, built specifically to put down beasts like this. One shot to pierce armor, another to end whatever life was left. The human didn't think. Thought meant hesitation, and hesitation meant losing. They dropped the repeater, snatched the last black fruit grenade from their belt, and charged straight into the recoil smoke of the commander's first shot. The Marine brought the rifle up, but the human was already too close. They slammed the grenade into the rifle's breech, yanked the Marine's trigger hand back, and let go. The explosion ripped the rifle apart, the force blasting both combatants backward. The human hit the deck hard enough to see stars, ears ringing, skin burning from shrapnel. The commander rolled, one arm gone from the elbow down, armor peeled open like a tin can. He reached for a sidearm with his remaining hand. The human moved faster. They slid the knife from their boot and jammed it under the commander's chin, right through the helmet's weak seal. The blade punched out the back of the neck, hot alien blood flooding down their wrist. They didn't stop until the Marines. Twitching slowed, then stilled. They turned. The beast lay sprawled across the gangway, one claw weakly hooked around the edge like it was refusing to fall. The hole in its side was massive, ragged entry, shredded exit, the kind of wound nothing walked away from. But its 6 eyes were still open, still locked on the human, still burning with that impossible defiance. The human scrambled to its side, hands already pressing on the wound, knowing it was pointless but refusing to let go. "Stay with me," they growled, voice shaking but sharp. The beast's chest rose, shuddered, and a low rumble rolled out. Not pain this time, something else. The freighter's engines coughed to life, the sound of salvation just meters away. The reactor warning sirens deepened, shifting from critical to seconds left. The station was going to blow, and if they didn't move now, both of them were going to be atom. As the beast's claw slipped from the gangway, the human grabbed hold of the beast's thick neck plates, teeth gritted so hard they hurt. Pulled with everything they had, muscles screaming, boots sliding on blood-slick metal. The freighter's gangway groaned under the combined weight, hydraulics whining in protest. The beast's other claw dug in, barely helping, but enough. Inch by inch, they dragged themselves onto the deck, just as the gangway retracted with a slam. The pilot, whoever the hell it was, didn't wait for orders. The freighter lurched forward, engines screaming, and the concourse behind them turned into a blinding wall of fire as the station's core went critical. The shockwaves slammed into the freighter's shields, rattling every bolt and rivet. When the light faded, the station was gone. Just dust, just silence. The humans sat against the freighter's bulkhead, drenched in alien blood, one hand still pressed to the beast's wound. It was still breathing, barely, but it was alive, and that, in human terms, meant the galaxy's problems had just begun. The chamber's air grew thicker with every passing heartbeat, and even the alien luminescence of the council's hall couldn't cut through the rising sense of suffocation. The galaxy's elite sat high in their tiered thrones, polished armor and flowing robes shimmering like a mockery of mercy. Below, the containment platform held the last surviving Theric, their enormous bodies trembling in exhaustion, chained with glistening biometal restraints. The Theric were a Titan-born race beasts to most, myths to some, but right now they were reduced to ragged breathing and flickers of defeated eyes. For cycles upon cycles they had been hunted, cornered, and slaughtered until these few were all that remained. The council claimed they were dangerous, uncontrovertibly incapable of coexisting with the galaxy's civilized races. Their verdict was simple extinction. Let the beasts die. Let their legacy vanish into the vacuum. But the human delegation, a tiny, almost laughable presence among the interstellar superpowers, refused to leave the matter closed. At the center of that delegation stood Captain Rin Calder, his face shadowed by the cold glow of the chambers. Highlights, his fists clenched, not enraged, but in something far sharper, far deadlier. His gaze wasn't on the council, nor the elite audience that had gathered for this spectacle. No, his eyes were locked on the Theric leader, the one the archives called Ironmane, whose blood was pooling dark beneath him, yet whose eyes still burned with feral defiance. The room was an execution chamber, disguised as politics. But in Calder's mind, it had just become a battlefield. The council speaker's voice cut through the air, velvet over steel, declaring the official sentence. A cascade of alien tongues echoed approval, like vultures picking a carcass clean. Calder didn't move. He let the words wash over him, but inside, his mind was a flurry of plans, routes, weapons, angles. His people had called him insane for even showing up here with a rescue in mind. The Theric were monsters, humanity's allies said, too dangerous to save, too ancient to adapt, too wild to be anything but a threat. But Calder had read deeper than propaganda. He'd seen the ancient records buried under layers of doctored history. The Theric weren't predators, they were protectors. Their wars were defensive, their brutality a reaction to invasion, their so-called savagery born from centuries of betrayal. And now, this same galaxy that had exploited them for generations wanted to erase them for convenience. Calder's heartbeat matched the slow swing of the executioner drones lowering from the ceiling, their segmented arms unfolding like the wings of metal carrion birds. He could hear the hiss of the Therac's chains reacting to the rising charge. The council wanted a clean, efficient execution, no mess, no chance for protest. He wanted the exact opposite. The plan was madness on paper. In practice, it was suicide. The moment he acted, every eye in the chamber would be on him. Security fields would snap to full lockdown. Plasma rifles would swing toward his position, and council assassins would emerge from every hidden panel. Calder didn't care. If humanity had a reputation, it was for doing the wrong thing so hard that the rest of the galaxy had to respect it, and saving the Theric, right here, in front of the entire damned council was about as wrong as it got. His hand brushed against the slim pulse detonator hidden in the fold of his jacket. One press, and the floor beneath the platform would destabilize just enough for his team, already infiltrated through the sublayers, to breach through and snatch the prisoners before the council realized what had happened. The risk was astronomical. One wrong second, and the Theric would be vaporized mid-rescue. One mistake, and Calder would not only die, but humanity's standing in the galaxy would be permanently crushed. Still, he found himself smiling, not the friendly kind, but the razor-edged grin of someone who knew there was no coming back from this, and liked the odds anyway. Above, the drones lowered closer, casting long skeletal shadows over the chained giants. The Theric leader's eyes locked with Calder's across the distance. There was no plea in them, no request for helpingly recognition, as if the beast already knew what the human was about to do. And in that silent exchange, the decision became absolute. Calder's thumbs slid over the detonator. The galaxy wanted to watch the beasts die. He was about to show them what happened when a human decided that wasn't going to happen. The night bled into the next cycle, and the sky above the quarantined beast world turned into a canvas of ash and silver. The alien council's warships hovered in low orbit, their shadow blotting out the sun for the creatures below. On the ground, the beast's massive, fur-covered titans with glowing amber eyes huddled together, trembling not from fear but from hunger and exhaustion. Their herds had been driven into smaller and smaller enclosures, penned in by force fields, their food stripped, their water poisoned with nanespore rot. It was the galaxy's idea of a clean extinction. No bombs, no firestorms, no mass graves, just a slow starvation until nothing was left. The politicians called it humane, the council called it necessary. The galaxy's masses called it justice, but one human called it bullshit. Captain Darian Vale stood inside the dim cockpit of the Iron Widow, a black, predatory ship with stealth plating so advanced that even the council's sensor webs couldn't sniff it out. He had been staring at the live holofeed for hours, watching the beasts weaken, their once proud movements slowing to a crawl. Their young lay limp in the dirt, eyes half closed, still breathing but barely. Darian had read the reports he knew, the story they sold to the galaxy. These creatures were violent, dangerous, incapable of coexistence. They were apex parasites, in the council's words. But Darian had been planetside before the culling order. He had looked one of those titans in the eyes, and what he saw there wasn't rigid, was pain. A pain the galaxy didn't care to understand. The council's deadline was 2 cycles away. In that time, the beasts would either be dead or too weak to move. And once the fields dropped, the scavenger fleets would descend, carving the planet apart for resources. Darian's own crew told him this mission was suicide stealing. A council-protected species from under their nose was a death sentence. But something in his gut refused to let go. Maybe it was humanity's old habit of rooting for the underdog. Maybe it was because humans had been in the beast's position once, cornered and labeled too dangerous to exist by the galaxy's elite, and had clawed their way back with stubborn, teeth-baring defiance. When the Iron Widow's engines powered down over the dark side of the planet, the atmosphere reeked of dust and decay. Darian stepped out into knee-high grass, the stalks brittle under his boots. His visor scanned for patrol drones too were nearby, skimming the perimeter like vultures. He slipped between them like a ghost, moving toward the containment zone. The barrier shimmered faintly, humming with the low thrum of high-voltage energy. On the other side, one of the titans lifted its head, nostrils flaring as it caught his scent. Even from 30 meters away, Darien could feel the weight of its gaze. Not hostile, just tired. He unhooked the first device from his belt, a human-made pulse disruptor designed to fry council tech without triggering alarms. He pressed it to the barrier's anchor point and counted down. The air cracked like lightning. The barrier's shimmer died in one spot, just wide enough for a single beast to slip through. The Titan hesitated. It had probably learned that openings meant traps. But Darien didn't move. He just stood there, arm extended, holding a nutrient injector the size of a rifle. The Titan's massive head lowered until its eye was level with his visor. Its breath rolled over him, hot and smelling faintly of crushed herbs and old wounds. Then, slowly, it stepped through. The ground trembled under its weight. Darien pushed the injector against its thick hide and triggered the feed. The beast flinched, but didn't strike. Seconds later, its trembling eased. Strength began to return to its muscles. And then, in a sound like rolling thunder, it made a low, guttural call that echoed through the containment field, from deep inside. The pen shadows began to move. The rescue became the stuff of whispered legend before it was even complete. Because the humans didn't just pull the beasts out, they fought tooth and nail for every last one. The alien spectators expected them to save the big ones, the ones with fangs and claws and intimidation value, but no. The humans went for the smallest, weakest, most useless-looking ones first. It was insanity to the onlookers. These frail creatures had no combat value, no trade worth, and no reason to be carried into the burning wreckage. But to the humans, each heartbeat was worth the same, and they acted like leaving even one behind was a sin that would burn in their bones forever. That kind of feral loyalty didn't make sense to anyone else in the galaxy. It was messy, wasteful, and dangerously emotional, but it was also magnetic. Watching them was like watching a wildfire dance, beautiful, chaotic, and impossible to turn away from. The council broadcast was still live, even though they hadn't meant it to be. Millions across the galaxy were watching raw footage of humans, covered in ash and blood, hauling creatures out of the collapsing structure. Teeth bared not in anger, but in raw determination. Every other species knew how to cut losses. Every other species understood when to stop throwing resources at a hopeless cause. But the humans didn't just ignore those rules, they shattered them, stomped on the shards, and kept moving. They looked reckless. They looked desperate. They looked unstoppable. And something deep in the hearts of the viewers stirred uncomfortably, because that kind of stubbornness was the kind of thing that rewrote destinies. One shot in particular made the galaxy gasp. A human, barely armored, carrying two half-dead beasts under each arm, sprinting through a collapsing hallway with flames clawing at their back. A girder fell. They didn't even slow down, they ducked, took the hit across their back, and kept moving like pain was just background noise. The camera caught their eyes for a split second, and they were wild-burning with that same untamed fire that made the Council fear humanity in the first place. The feed went static for a moment after an explosion, and the galaxy leaned forward, not even realizing they were holding their breath. When the signal came back, the humans were outside. The beasts lay in a pile breathing, alive. The human rescuers were on their knees, sucking in air, covered in burns and cuts. And then, without fanfare, without even looking at the camera, they went back in. No victory lap, no grand speech. Just back into the hellfire, because there was still more inside. That moment became the one image that would be etched into galactic memory for decades. Humans refusing to stop, refusing to leave anyone behind, refusing to care about cost when lives were on the line. And that was when the fear began to change. The galaxy had always feared humans because they were unpredictable, dangerous, and too willing to fight. But this was a different kind of fear. This was the realization that humans could not be controlled, not with rules, not with threats, not with the promise of loss. They were a species willing to drown themselves in fire to pull out something they loved, and there was no counter-strategy. For that kind of devotion was impossible to negotiate with, impossible to buy off, and impossible to kill. The Council tried to spin it. They tried to paint the humans as reckless savages who endangered everyone with their antics. But the footage had already sunk its claws into the galaxy's heart. People replayed it over and over, seeing things the Council didn't want them to notice. The careful way humans shielded the beasts with their own bodies. The way they coordinated silently in the chaos. The way they didn't waste a second on anything that wasn't survival. And more than anything, the way they looked at the rescued creatures afterward, not like possessions, not like trophies, but like family. Somewhere in the galaxy, someone whispered the words that would catch fire in the days to come. If they'd do that for beasts, what would they do for each other? And the truth of it made everyone shiver. The Galactic Council's official channels began flooding with arguments, counter-arguments, and raw panic. Whole fleets were retasked from their stations to respond to the unexpected human intervention. But the chatter in back channels was far more telling. Leaders whispering in encrypted comes about what this meant for the balance of power. Humanity had already been a wild card, a race too stubborn to bend and too reckless to back down. But now they'd pulled off something the Council's finest minds had declared impossible. The beast species, believed lost, were not only alive, but thriving under human protection, and footage of the rescue was circulating faster than the Council could scrub it. In the hollers, human marines carried alien cubs the size of cars, like they were kittens. Soldiers sang lullabies in languages they didn't even understand, and towering beast warriors, once considered feral, knelt to their human saviors in gratitude. These images were burning themselves into the public consciousness across dozens of star systems, making censorship almost pointless. The Council's propaganda machine tried to spin it as a rogue act of military insubordination, but no one was buying it. It didn't help that the beasts themselves, newly armed and armored by human engineers, began broadcasting their own message, a vow of loyalty to the species that had saved them when the galaxy turned its back. What had started as a rescue mission had now become a political nightmare, a seismic shift that hinted at alliances the Council had never considered, and wars they could no longer predict. And through it all, the human ships stayed in orbit above the beast's homeworld, daring anyone, Council, fleet or otherwise, to try and take them away. Behind the scenes, the Council convened in an emergency session deep within their fortified Chamberza Circular, lightless hole where each delicate silhouette was barely visible behind a veil of holographic distortion. The air was tense, filled with the muffled hum of translation devices and the faint rustle of robes as species of every imaginable physiology shifted uncomfortably. The Chancellor's voice, a cold metallic resonance that echoed from every wall, demanded a unified response before the situation spiraled beyond control. But unity was a fantasy. Old rivalries flared instantly. Some factions demanded a full-scale assault to seize the beasts and contain human expansion, while others warned that a war against humanity now could fracture the galaxy beyond repair. Reports from intelligence officers painted a grim picture. The beast's homeworld was rapidly becoming a fortress, its defense grid growing more sophisticated by the hour thanks to human tech. Worse still, human diplomats operating without official approval from Earth's central government were negotiating trade and military pacts with the beasts, and several fringe council species were quietly sending envoys to join them. Every passing hour eroded the council's leverage. The Chancellor tried to impose order, but the room dissolved into a cacophony of threats, accusations, and whispered schemes. No one dared admit it out loud, but deep down, many of them feared the same thing. This wasn't just a rescue mission gone rogue. This was the beginning of a coalition that could shatter the Council's centuries-long dominance, led by the one species they had never managed to control. Far beyond the Council's chamber, aboard the human flagship Resolute Dawn, Admiral Vance stood over a massive holotable displaying shifting tactical overlays of the beast's territory. The luminous lines of potential battle routes pulsed like veins, each one a calculated gamble. Around him, the ship's bridge buzzed with controlled urgency, officers moving between stations, encrypted comms flashing with bursts of alien glyphs as they coordinated with the beast allies. Vance's face was carved in stone, his eyes fixed, not on the enemy lines, but on the steadily growing sphere of influence surrounding the beast's homeworld. Every trade convoy that entered, every defense satellite launched, and every new species flag appearing in orbit meant one thing. The Council's grip was loosening in a sealed comlink. The beast's chieftain, a towering horned figure draped in layered armor, appeared before Vance. Their deep, guttural speech rolled through the translator, expressing both gratitude and a dangerous kind of trust. They spoke of ancient prophecies, of a time when outsiders would arrive not to enslave, but to awaken their kind to a larger purpose. Vance said nothing about prophecy. Humans didn't need destiny, they made their own. Still, he knew the symbolism mattered to them. The alliance wasn't just military, it was cultural, almost spiritual. And that was precisely why the Council feared it. What the Council didn't yet know was that Resolute Dawn was already preparing to deploy the Umbra Protocol, a covert operation designed not just to defend the beasts, but to destabilize the Council from within. The mission wasn't sanctioned by Earth Command, but Vance didn't care. He understood what many back home didn't yet see. If the Council fell, humanity wouldn't just be a galactic player, they'd be the ones setting the rules. And for that, Vance was willing to risk everything. Even war, the Umbra Protocol's first stage, unfolded quietly, masked beneath the chaos of routine skirmishes along the border worlds. Stealth frigates, small, angular craft painted in radar alloys, slipped through dead zones in the Council's sensor web, navigating ancient asteroid belts and derelict ship graveyards to avoid detection. Inside them, a mix of human operatives and beast-born shadow warriors moved in perfect silence, their armor blackened to match the void. Their target wasn't a fleet, nor a fortress, but the nerve centers of the Council's influence, hidden data archives, encrypted trade hubs, and the deep vaults where centuries of political blackmail was stored like precious ore. These strikes weren't meant to be flashy. In fact, they were designed to look like unfortunate accidents, power grid failures, cascading reactor overloads, software corruption that seemed to spring from nowhere. Every accident erased records of debt, rewrote shipping manifests, and quietly unbound smaller civilizations from the Council's economic leash. On more than one occasion, those liberated factions immediately sent envoys to the beasts' homeworld, pledging trade and military cooperation. The map on Vance's holotable changed in real time. and every new alliance was another nail in the Council's coffin. But the Council wasn't blind forever. By the time the Resolute Dawn initiated the third phase, embedding human and beast operatives into the Council's outer diplomatic cores, rumors had begun to circulate in the Senate halls of Irides's Prime, whispers of an unseen hand guiding the rebellion, of human fingerprints on events that seemed far too coordinated to be random. The Council began dispatching elite counterintelligence units, each sworn to root out the mysterious influence. Yet, the more they searched, the deeper the shadows became. Vance's operatives weren't just avoiding detection, they were feeding the Council false trails, leading their hunters into traps and disinformation loops so convincing that entire fleets were redirected on wild chases through empty space. It was working too well, perhaps, because with every successful maneuver, Vance could feel the noose tightening. The more ground they gained, the more certain it became that the final confrontation was no longer avoidable. And when that day came, there would be no shadows to hide in, only fire, steel, and the judgment of history. The breach widened into a gaping wound in the fortress wall, spilling cold night air and the stench of ozone into the chamber where the last defender stood. Above them, the sky roared not with thunder, but with the howl of alien warships breaking the sound barrier in their descent. Their sleek black hulls reflected the lightning that crawled across the clouds, and every flash lit up the horror etched on the faces of those who realized the end was here. The beasts, those towering furred titans with eyes like molten amber, staggered under the relentless hail of energy fire. Their hides, thick enough to turn blades and shatter arrows, now smoked and burned under weapons built to erase cities. The crowd of galaxy dignitaries watching from the safety of their orbital vessels said nothing they had already voted. Already decided, the beasts would die here, their extinction deemed necessary for galactic stability. But then came the sound that cut through every voice, every scream, every pulse of cannon fire, a deep, deafening boom from the clouds above. A human gunship, patched with mismatched armor plates and painted with crude graffiti, tore through the blockade like a knife through rotted silk. It wasn't sleek. It wasn't elegant. It was ugly, loud, and brimming with a kind of dangerous, reckless confidence that no alien ship could fake. Its hull bore scorch marks from old battles, each one a badge of survival. Engines howled like beasts of their own, spitting blue plasma that scorched the air as it descended in a sharp dive. The alien fleet scrambled, but their formations broke as the human vessels spat a barrage of missiles that didn't just target ships. They targeted the ground troops, tearing into the beasts. Explosions bloomed like flowers of fire, each one shaking the mountain to its roots. In the chaos, the human pilot's voice roared over the open comms, not begging for surrender, not requesting permission, just a savage, two-word declaration. Not today. Every sensor in orbit scrambled to focus on the human ship. Data feeds poured across news channels, tactical relays, and military command hubs. No one understood why a lone human would throw themselves into an unwinnable slaughter for a species their own governments had abandoned. The beasts were considered obsolete, monstrous relics of a primitive war age, too dangerous to live among the civilized races. But the human craft cut a swath through the enemy ranks with surgical ferocity, landing between the wounded titans and their executioners. The pilot jumped out before the landing gear even locked, armor dented and scratched, but still gleaming under the starlight. They moved like a storm-given flesh, a blur of steel and muscle and raw intent. One beast, barely breathing, lifted its head to see the stranger standing in front of it, shielding its massive body with something as small and fragile as a human frame. The alien commanders, watching from the safety of their warships, could only stare because, in that instant, it wasn't strategy or politics or treaties that dictated the battlefield. It was one human, standing in the middle of hell, daring the galaxy to try and finish the job. And the galaxy hesitated. The surface of the world was no longer silent. From the smoking ruins of the outer bastion to the steaming black rivers that cut across the scorched valleys, sound and life had returned like an uninvited storm. The first sign had been the trembling of the ground deep, steady and rhythmic, the kind of vibration that you could feel in your teeth and spine. It was followed by a low, growling hum, alien yet oddly alive. Then, from the blasted tree, the so-called dead beasts emerged not in twos or threes, but in swarms, their numbers stretching beyond the horizon. Every alien eye watching the live feed from orbit thought it was some kind of mirage, some fever dream of heat and smoke. But it was real. The beasts were alive, and they were angry. The galaxy had written them off as extinct after the cleansing protocols. The Council had recorded the operation as complete eradication, stamping it in sterile digital ink for the archives. But the human had changed that. Somehow, through a madness no other species could understand, he had stayed behind on the burning planet. He had ignored evacuation orders. He had ignored reason. And for 3 long weeks, he had done something the galaxy didn't believe was possible, kept these so-called extinct creatures breathing, moving, fighting. Every instinct in alien politics screamed that this was dangerous. Letting apex predators survive was like planting bombs under your own throne. But to the human, letting them die had never been an option. That was the difference of the thing. Every alien kept misunderstanding about his kind. No one knew the full details of what he'd done in those silent, brutal days. The feeds had gone dark, and orbital sensors couldn't get clean readings through the churning storm clouds. But the aftermath told the story in the most visceral way possible. The beasts didn't just survive, they came back stronger, meaner, and somehow coordinated. It was as if the human had taught them, spoken to them, convinced them to fight back against the extermination fleets. Even more chilling was the way they moved, now forming ranks, surrounding armored patrols, herding enemy drones into kill zones like they had been trained for war. From the warships above, the alien commanders watched in a silence that reeked of dread. They didn't want to believe it, but they couldn't deny what they were seeing. Humanity's madness had crossed into something far more dangerous. This wasn't just rescue, it was weaponization. The beasts weren't just surviving. They were hunting with intent, tearing through elite kill teams, dragging metal gunships from the sky like predators pulling prey into deep water. The transmission logs from ground units were pure panic screams cut short, armor alarms blaring, static-laced cries for extraction. And the human, he was always just outside visual range, moving like a shadow between burning ruins. His voice occasionally caught in the coms, low, steady, coaxing the monsters forward. The Council didn't understand what they were really up against yet. They still thought of the human as a rogue outlier, a reckless anomaly. But what they couldn't see, what the older, sharper minds in the darker corners of the galaxy did see, was that this was the first spark of something they had feared for centuries. It wasn't the beasts alone, it was the human instinct too. Take the unwanted, the broken, the dangerous, and turn them into an army. That instinct had once made humanity the most terrifying force in the void, and now, against every calculated probability, it was waking up again, and when it fully woke, it wouldn't stop with one planet's beasts. The alien fleets still had numerical superiority. They still had orbital control. They still thought they could put this fire out. But even as they prepared their final cleansing wave, their analysts were picking up disturbing patterns. The beasts were no longer confined to the original habitat zones. Something or someone was guiding them toward the enemy landing fields. Would you like me to keep going into the part where the alien fleets begin their desperate counterattack and realize it's already too late? That's where the tension will spike, the moment the shield generators failed. The battlefield lit up in a storm of violet lightning and burning plasma arcs, slicing across the sky like the angry handwriting of some cosmic god. The alien warships hovered low, their hulls glistening with predatory intent, waiting for the kill order. Every sensor ping screamed the same message: the beasts are dying. The last pockets of resistance were being shredded in the open. Nothing but smoldering wreckage and bodies left in the dirt. It should have been the end. It was supposed to be the end. The Galactic Council had decided this war wasn't worth the resources. They'd voted to let the beast kind perish, marking them as a lost cause in some cold, bureaucratic file. But then, too late for reason, yet just in time for chaos, the humans came. They didn't glide in on elegant stuff. They came in ragged, battle-scarred warships that looked like someone had bolted scrap metal onto rage itself and sent it screaming through space. No warning, no formal declaration, no elegant speeches, just raw, brutal arrival. The first salvo they fired was so loud it made the comm channels hiss with static. It didn't look like mercy. It looked like madness. And yet, as the alien beasts below cowered behind broken barricades, they realized the madness was aimed at the enemy. Human drop pods began punching through the atmosphere like meteor showers, each one loaded with soldiers who looked more like predators than saviors. The beasts had heard stories about humans, but nothing prepared them for the truth. This wasn't a rescue. This was a hunt. From orbit, the human fleet moved like a swarm of knives. No formation manuals, no predictable maneuvers, just a savage, coordinated chaos that ripped the enemy to pieces. Every time the alien warships tried to retreat into the clouds, the humans would follow, forcing them down like wolves, snapping at the throats of cornered prey. And on the ground, in the ash and choking smoke, human soldiers advanced through streets that had already been painted with blood. Their armor was dented, their weapons mismatched, but their eyes, those eyes burned with something the Council could never manufacture: a spite, not the calculated, efficient cruelty of empire building, but the kind that came from a place deep in the marrow. The kind that said, if you want to kill them, you'll have to go through us. For the beasts, it was a sight that burned itself into memory.